very good afternoon. It's Wednesday. Hello.
Hello. Ask me how my day's been so far, why don't you?
Russ, how's your day been so far?
Don't ask. Well, my dog has got a new habit. Hello, goodbye.
Well,
Penny Horner, suddenly Paul McCartney and John Lennon all in one. Hello, goodbye. Wow, what does that mean? Don't know. Anywho, my dog has a new thing that she wakes me up at least now 3 times. You know I'm a terrible sleeper, so when I get to sleep, it's a miracle. She now wakes me up 3 times to go out. 3 times. It's like having a baby again. Morning, gentlemen, says your mother, Linda Dave. And Lee Durnford. Well, it might be for you, matey. I think it's highly unlikely. Hello, Melanie Hutchins. Hello. So she wakes me up 3 times. And it's just nuts, right? So at about 4:15, 4:45, I gave up. Oh, no, Penny Horner. What did she say, Phil? Phil.
Penny Horner says wants to be first on comments,
but now I have to leave. It's like she has a career. Who's she kidding? Cheek. Blooming nerve. Now, so I gave up, sat in the kitchen, made myself a nice strong cup of tea, and I finally got off to sleep. And what happens? I got the first of the spam fake phone calls. I'm livid. Go back to bed, trying to get some more sleep. This phone goes again. Yes, another spam fake phone call. Man, I wish I could find them. I would find them. So I completely gave up and just, it's horrible. Ramsey Weimer Salem. Why? Hello, Angela. Afternoon, boys. Ed Grossman. Afternoon, everybody. Hello, says Jules Silverman and Sue Sleet up in Fife via Bromley and Staples Corner. Says hi, guys.
Hi,
Penny Horner's gone. Hi, Sue. Anyway, so that was my day, and then I looked out the window and it's like, I don't know what it's like in Hertfordshire, but I can assure you where I am, it's absolutely piddling darn.
Well, I'm delighted to report that it doesn't seem to be too wet here, but what it is very misty because it's not. It's so misty.
Hold my hand.
It appears foggy. You know that sort of.
It's just rubbish. It's really, really, really wet, and soaking.
Disgusting the weather.
Tea green.
As opposed
I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. You know, in the Christmas time, East 17 goes, stay now. And that one, right? If you could finish eating during a live broadcast, I'd be so grateful. You know that East 17, stay now, and all of that, that's all Tea Green. He's a fantastic vocal artist. Off you go. You do some work instead of drinking tea.
Thanks.
It's soup. I'm having soup.
Apparently, I've morphed into Bruce Forsyth without realizing.
I'm not even going to go there. It can't be asked. I think I'm the only person in the country who wasn't a huge fan.
Stephen Marsh says, I received a call from a market research firm asking about spiced ham. Turns out it's a spam call. There we go. Thank you for that, Stephen. I almost
meet you. I'm just going to slap you, and that's all there is to it.
I have had some good fun with those spam calls, actually, in the time, because it's the only way to make me feel better. I actually think you can go 2 ways with those spam calls. You can either get really wound up by it and let it annoy you, or what you can do is you can have a bit of fun with it. Because let's be honest, the person at the other end of the phone doesn't want to be there any more than you want them to call you. To them, it's a job.
Yep.
And to you, it's a pain in the proverbial.
Sure.
For me, whenever I get that, I don't normally get them about anything like a vaccination. What I have had before, though, is someone telling me that there's a problem with my computer. Now, to anyone who doesn't know, is away from the world of radio. I can't do much in this life, but I can do technology.
You certainly can.
I am actually just to give some context as opposed to showing off, I am actually a Microsoft certified computer technician away from the world of radio. I know the crowd went woo. Anyway, the point is...
The crowd are going, him?
Yeah, I know, right? Really? But anyway, The reason why I mention this is because I've had a couple of those phone calls in the past where someone phones up and says there's a terrible problem with your computer. You know the ones I mean. They phone up and they say that we've detected a virus on your computer, absolutely need to connect and do something to remedy it. Now, in the early days, I'd just hang up. I wouldn't say a thing. But now I have a bit of fun with it. Because I make out as if I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. Funny enough, by the way, they don't have a clue what they're talking about. It's not the point. So anyway, they just read from a script. And I let them say what they're going to say. And I said, okay, right, so what do I need to do about it? And they say, oh, that you need to go to the following website. Okay, right, okay. And then what do I need to write? You need to click on this and it will install this. Oh, right. I said, but hang on a second. How do I know this is genuine? And they'll repeat the fact that they're from somewhere like Microsoft, which of course they're not from Microsoft. Let me tell you how I know this, by the way. Very simple. Microsoft have enough issues with people calling them. They do not have the infrastructure in place to call you. If you get a phone call from someone claiming to be from Microsoft, it's bunkum. Don't listen to it, please.
Bunkum. There's a word we haven't heard.
I use that a lot.
Hey, you know what we should do?
I just follow along. I follow along and then get to a certain point where I waste their time as much as I possibly can. And then I finally turn around and say to them, actually, I probably should declare I'm a Microsoft certified technician. I happen to know this is a hoax. I've now made a note of your number and I will be passing it on to the authorities. Thank you for your time. And as a result of it, they usually hang up. There you go. Isn't that fun? Anyway.
Ed Grossman, Russ Phil. When I get those calls and take them, I pretend to be in prison. I can't read the other bit because that would be kind of against our ethos here at MRS. It's so much fun, really. Sue Sleet, when I get spam calls, I threaten them with a legal action under stalking laws. She doesn't mess around, does she? Old Sue Sleet, she does not mess around. Now, you've just said something very interesting. I know, the crowd goes, what?
By the way, we've got some guests coming up on stage show.
I know we have got a very important guest because it's a very important issue. Oh, hello, you pain in the ass dog. Not speaking to her.
There's absolutely no way to talk about your
So you used the word bunkum, which I haven't heard in ages. And I was saying to somebody the other day on the phone, there's certain words you don't hear. When I was a kid, the word clot. And you always see it in comics and like the Beezer and the Beano and stuff. You clot. So you don't hear clot. You don't hear twit. And what other words apart from I'm happy?
The main reason why you don't hear the word clot anymore is it's offensive to haemophiliacs. But anyway.
That's very good. Lee Durnford, who apparently is in his pajamas for some reason, just asked them where they got your number from. They usually hang up immediately as to know they break data rules.
Well, quite.
Where do they get it all from? They're selling it for like a fraction of a pair. It's disgusting. Hey, I've got to get my car MOT'd. I'm not looking forward to that. Means someone's got to touch my car.
Well, quite.
No, I'm serious. Oh, poppycock. That's a good one, Stephen. Stephen Marsh. Poppycock, not often heard. People don't blow enough raspberry.
I tell you what.
Kimmy, have you recovered? Kimmy Lashmar, have you recovered from your blazing row about my silly joke, the video I put up about Toya Wilcox and Robert Fripp, her husband of many years? Wow, that kicked off. I wasn't expecting that, Kimmy. It was just the gag, you know? It was kind of light-hearted thing.
I tell
you got very upset. Oh, she's fine. Good. Okay, good. That's the main thing.
You know, one that you don't hear anymore, and I'm not sure whether or not this is actually more of a saying or whether or not it is a word in itself, but I reckon people don't use oopsie daisies much anymore. That's very useful.
I love that. Lee Durford is not in his pajamas, to clarify. Right, let's move on to the matter in hand. Mm-hmm. And it was this. Yesterday on Tinternet, on the ANA Facebook page, I saw a very, very interesting question. And I'm going to paraphrase, if I may be so bold. And it says, with all this knowledge about mental health and psychotherapy, etc., why are we in such a mental health crisis? So I reached out to the big cheese, the grand fromage of ANA, none other than Dave Sleet. And I said, would you like to come on the show? Because I think it's Angela Lee's in her pajamas and Jules is in a dressing gown. Thanks, Lee. I appreciate it. Anyway, over to you, Philip Dave, somewhere in Hertfordshire, at a secret location.
Thanks. Well, we are delighted to
Me
say,
without sleep. It drives me nuts. Go on.
don't worry, it's not much fun on the receiving end, I can tell you. Right. Delighted to report that it's not just Russ and I who are here today. Oh no, we actually have managed to source someone brave enough to join us in the middle of the week.
Yeah.
Found not one person, but two people brave enough to join us.
Two people.
No.
Two people.
Exciting, because we don't just have Dave Sleet, oh yeah, him of A&A. We actually have alongside him the marvelous Siobhan Crosby as well, who's CEO of APA. Welcome to you both.
There they are.
Good morning. How you doing, guys?
Look, if that isn't the top team staring at you right away. I mean, you've got Russ and I.
Therapeutic team. There they are.
Russ and I are the duo who prat about trying to make radio out of this, but you actually do some serious stuff. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Now, and also, Siobhan Crosby does some very, very good gags, which has nothing to do with A&A, but it makes they make me laugh a lot most days. Now, let's hand over to you and wind back to what the question was posed to you, Dave. I seem to recall. Yeah. And then I thought this is really, really this is an important issue. So give us some context of how the question was posed.
Okay, so a lot of what APA does kind of circulates around working with people that are not therapists, not counsellors, not coaches, but people that are teachers, social workers, family support workers. All people that are working on the edge of the world of psychology and connect with it on a regular basis. And a social worker posed the question about, there's all this understanding. Psychology has been spoken about for almost 100 years in some way, shape or form, but we've got a mental health crisis. What's gone wrong somewhere in there? What's the problem?
Dave, can I ask you actually at this stage, when you say we've got a mental health crisis, because I think this is important for people to actually understand why you think that, because some might say, well, actually, maybe we've just had this all along and people are only just more aware of mental health now. Why do you say specifically now that we have a mental health crisis, quote?
I think the question was being posed because the overall understanding, like you said, mental health awareness has gone through the roof. And it was climbing before 2020 started. When 2020 kicked in, everything was amplified. All of the pressure points that we experienced as individuals, but also as the system, were really put under the microscope. And we could really see where the flaws were, we could see where the disconnects were, and we could see where people were struggling in ways that we hadn't even acknowledged could be struggling before. And I think for a lot of people on the outside looking in, that looks like a crisis. And I think that's where the term really comes from, is the looking into a situation and going, that's a mess, nothing's working, it's not getting positive outcomes. And the word that humans go to in that situation is crisis.
Okay. So, yes, Ed Grossman, who co-produces the show apparently with Phil, could you get a little nearer them? You're slightly. I'd be so great because what you're saying is important. We want to hear it, Ed.
I suspect the problem is that if you get much closer, then they're probably breaking the 2 meter rule. Oh, hang on a second. So.
I think that'll be all right. I'm not too worried. It's going to be the 3 meter. Okay, is that any better? Let's see. So. What are the waiting lists now? I mean, how's this going to be dealt? Oh, Lee Durnford wants to know. Right, let's back up. What is APA? Right.
Okay, so APA stands for ANA Psychological Accreditation, and ANA is a word that started out from Siobhan's imagination, and we discovered. Yeah, I'll let Siobhan kind of come in on that and kind of explain the thinking behind it and where it kind of came from.
Okay, well, for me, A&A came from, if you like, A as in the beginning of the alphabet, Z being the end, but there's never really an ending. We all carry on in some way, shape, or form. And for me, being diagnosed with cancer and surviving that cancer and being in remission meant that I never, if you like, ended my life on earth. So I literally just went, well, A brings us back to A because we never actually end. We live in other people's memories even when we die. So if I just put A and A together, I'll see whether or not Company's House has got it. I'll see what the meaning is. And that's exactly how it panned out. And the fact that the meaning of A&A meant torchbearers, leaders, mavericks was absolutely perfect for what I
So
wanted.
it's an actual word as well. It's not just you making that up. It's an actual word that means those things. How interesting! I didn't even know that. All right, we've got to address this.
We didn't know either.
Oh, lucky potluck. Now we've got to answer Stephen Marsh's point. You guys, if you wouldn't mind. Stephen Marsh is saying, I don't follow. Physical health has been talked about for eons, but so many people have severe physical health issues. Both physical and mental health issues will always be there, unfortunately. It's nothing to do with the period of time they've been spoken about or since procedures have improved. Human bodies and minds are designed to go wrong.
Yeah, but hang on a second, Stephen. I beg to differ, because it's exactly the same way that some medical conditions haven't been spoken about for ages. If they're not discovered to actually be spoken about, then for all intents and purposes, you could go back to a time when people used to be drowned because they thought that there was something wrong with them, when, of course, actually, history, looking back at it, could probably tell you that that individual probably suffered with some sort of mental health condition. So I absolutely think it's when it's discovered.
Yeah. I don't think it's about time. I think it's about the simple fact that we have COVID at the moment. Mental health has exploded as a topic on the news, which it's never ever done before. I've been a therapist now since 2003. It's never been recognised as almost being part of our body, part of one being. It's almost like the physical has been separated out. And because the word mental is such an old word, which signifies madness, then it automatically creates that stigma and it automatically creates that taboo of not talking about it. What's happened with the coronavirus, because there's a crisis in the mental health world and has been for decades. It's simply the fact that all of a sudden the coronavirus is exposing it in the biggest way we've ever seen since I've been alive. So I think it's definitely right. It's not about the time. It's about the recognition of what's happening now, and it's actually being discussed and talked about.
I have a question for you both, because when we all went into lockdown 1, people were saying, and I have a certain sympathy for this. I really do. Look, for God's sake, people survived the war, and the Blitz was happening, and right. So we're not getting bombs rained on us. This was how the argument went, right? We're not getting bombs rained on us, and you got a roof over your head, and you got some food on the table. And you got Netflix on TV. What's your big problem? This was kind of how people were trotting it out, thinking it would be over by May, right? So like a year on, and people are going, geez. Even with all those things happening, people are struggling. There's no ifs or buts about it. Everybody is affected. I don't know anybody at all saying, yeah, I'm fine, no problem. Everybody has been affected. And my questions are, do you think this is long term? Do you think once some normality, we'll never get back to completely how it was, but some normality is restored, people will be okay? What's your view?
I think back in March, we published the first set of guidance on how to cope with being in isolation. And ultimately that was about finding a new structure, because we are creatures of habit. We create our own sense of normality, our own time frames for what we do every day. And when that's taken away from us, we're almost in free fall, and we don't know how to be. Our entire kind of contact point with how to operate have been taken away. And that destabilizes everything that we think and that we do. And that's something that is going to be traumatic for everyone that experiences that. We also said back in spring last year that if the world looks at what is happening with coronavirus as an international grieving process, we have all gone through grief for the way we used to live our lives. And we can't go back to the way something was before it died. It's died. What we have to do is find new ways of being with that grief. And then we can start looking at what was wrong before, what were the things that we knew didn't work, and we can let them go. And we've got time to put in measures for what we want to fill those gaps with. So for example,
I was going to ask, why do you think people are so exhausted? Because you're doing much less, but why psychologically, and I know this is across the board from so many people, they're just exhausted. And you've got to say, well, what from?
Am I allowed to try and have a guess at what this might be? Because I reckon that when you're doing nothing, you've got more time to think. When you've got more time to think, you've got more time to spiral.
That's certainly definitely one of the reasons. So good response there, Phil. But there's also the anxiety. Anxiety automatically, it's like the same as getting on a treadmill with your body. Your mind is going all the time. And that automatically will tire out anybody. Secondly, when we're doing less physical things, we automatically, ironically, get more tired because we're not releasing endorphins, we're not getting the chance to do that. So combined with the stress of feeling trapped and controlled, plus anxiety, plus what you just said, which is a great way of explaining it, we've got more time to think. And the more time that we have to think, often all the things that people have been burying for years are suddenly coming right to the surface and they're having to work with them. So the tiredness will actually impact, even on therapists. Zoom therapy appointments are 100% more tiring, and it's already tiring doing therapy, but doing it via Zoom is a lot more intense because you've got all the technological aspects of Zoom rather than just the you and that client in front of you. You're having to be conscious of switching over from a laptop to a phone to try and make sure the technology works. If it all falls apart, it actually is a lot more work. So in essence, tiredness is one of the biggest issues that actually affect our vulnerability. When we're tired, we think negatively. When we think negatively, it can spiral into anything. And it's the unpredictability of each individual and how they spiral that we can't define.
Now, Angela Lee has made two very, very interesting comments. And Philip, if you could pop them up on the screen, I'll give you a quid. You are stigmatized by the GP people, doctors. Tell me, whatever they go for, it's put down to anxiety and it's not treated properly. And then she says, once mental health difficulty is on record, people get treated differently and not for the good. So I'm guessing she's speaking from some personal experience of herself or family members or friends. I don't know. It's not for me to inquire. How do you feel about that?
No, I've seen it happen. Shocking amount of times where the moment somebody has something on their medical records on anxiety, I've actually seen it with broken limbs, where people have gone to the hospital with a broken limb, and because their history has got anxiety in it on their medical records, the broken limb has been dismissed and actually completely ignored. So
it's not fixed. Hang on, whoa, Siobhan, it's not fixed.
The focus becomes the anxiety.
Yes, you're anxious about something being broken when it's actually not broken, when actually it was broken. So,
there is a factor as well to bear in mind. Where we talk about the disconnect between the psychological, the mental health component of a human being and their physical component, the medical profession has benefited and driven that divide. So the physical health and well-being has become the prominent focus within the medical profession, and the psychological has been pushed to the back of the room. So when somebody goes to a medical professional, the medical professional doesn't have the psychological connectivity to be able to link those things together. And that's part of why the mental health crisis exists, is because the medical side and the physical health, it has taken precedent over a third of what is the human existence.
And a GP doesn't have the education and the understanding of the unconscious, but their natural response is an antidepressant. And we know that antidepressants, you might as well put a plaster over a wound and hope it won't bleed out. The fact of the matter is, it will bleed out. And
Interestingly, Angela Lee, by the way.
That's almost like a juxtapose autopilot, isn't it?
Yes.
Wow. That's
I
horrible.
was just going to make the point, Phil, that Angela Lee works in the NHS. So she knows what she's talking about. Angela Lee, who made those very interesting points, works in the NHS. So I think she has great validity.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing, because I think the more people within the NHS that are, and the numbers are increasing, people are becoming more aware that the connectivity with psychological well-being and physical well-being is so crucial, because if you don't feel right, your body will slow down and you will give up, and your body will then start to produce physical symptoms. And if we can't fix the mental health part, we're always just going, like Siobhan said, we're just going to be putting a sticking plaster over the physical wound and not actually dealing with what is causing that.
Well, the ironic thing is, if we worked with mental health services in a much more efficient way, the millions of pounds that it would actually save on physical difficulties would be absolutely mind-blowing, because everybody psychosomatically responds to their emotions.
Yep.
Their emotions have to play out through the body. The more down we get, the more vulnerable we are to pick up illnesses.
Totally agree. I think so much of it, and it's not Californian tree hugging bullshit. I honestly believe that, if you have a positive, you survived cancer, right?
Yeah.
And one thing I can tell you, if it's going to get you, it's going to get you, but you will have a much better chance if you have a positive mental attitude, because your brain does produce certain reactions within your body that will help fight. It's not nonsense like coffee enemas and all this other rubbish. It's true. It's true. Now
actually, nothing is technically rubbish if it helps you as an individual. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine last night who's going through a really rough patch at the moment. And she was saying that when she's asked people to pray for sort of something that she's got someone in her family who's very unwell at the moment, and said she's asked for thoughts and prayers. Now, prayers mean something to her. I know they don't mean a lot to a lot of people, but when she picked up on the fact that they don't mean a lot to a lot of people, and she said, the reaction I get when I say to people pray is a bit sort of twitchy, and I said, look, do you know what? If it means something to you, what does it matter what other people's reaction is? If you think it's going to help you get through it, I don't care what other people think.
I think that's a huge. I think Phil's made a hugely valid point. It's not for me, but if it helps, then it's a marvelous thing. Now, Angela Lee in the NHS, and then I want to ask you a specific question, you two. Mental health is so underfunded, we have to wait hours sometimes from input from mental health practitioners. Now, that kind of is a little bit of an entree into the question I was going to ask. If we take it away from the theoretical, let's get down to the absolute practical of this.
The bottleneck within...
So my question is this. Before COVID, even if it was an absolute freaking emergency, you were on probably a 6-week wait before you could see anybody. That might as well be 6 years, let's be honest. Post-COVID, or during COVID and during this nightmare in which we find ourselves, we're looking at probably a waiting time of a year, which is useless. Let's be honest about it. It's useless. If someone's in crisis, saying, well, we'll deal with you in a year, that is like a road traffic accident saying the ambulance will be along in 12 months. It's not going to have a happy outcome. What practically do you think's going to happen?
Oh, practically think what's going to happen in
If nothing
comparison to
changes.
what I would like to happen are two
No.
different things.
What do you actually think?
Let me just
We know
check
what
that.
you'd like to happen. What do you think will happen?
If nothing changes, we will have a situation where the professionals working on the front line will go through trauma responses that will keep them out of work. Full stop.
You will absolutely have complex post-traumatic stress out of every medical profession that's gone through and is working on the front line now. So you're looking at a massive increase in suicides. Ultimately, that is the bottom line. We are looking at, if this isn't changed, a massive increase in people dying through pure suicide.
Is that a gut feeling or is that your professional feeling? Because that's a huge statement you make.
Every single thing and every person I've ever worked with on the knowledge of the stress that those frontline workers are going through daily. They are dealing with death after death after death of a patient. That is traumatic. That will turn into complex post-traumatic stress because it's a continuing traumatic situation daily. That has to come out of the body. And unfortunately, without the correct help and support, you will have people that will take their own lives.
And not to further add to the depressing state of that statement, but I can't help but wonder that is that going to ultimately lead to an even further shortage of medical staff within the NHS, which subsequently means more people won't receive the treatment they need, and subsequently more unnecessary people will lose their lives. It's a heck of a knock-on effect if you think about it.
Yeah, the domino effect is phenomenal. And the problem that Angela has highlighted, and I'm really glad that she's part of this conversation. So thank you, Angela. The getting mental health practitioners to work with the NHS has been put through a bottleneck by the mental health system. It's estimated over 100,000 qualified therapeutic professionals that are qualified at a level accepted to be able to work with people. Okay. At the last recorded count, there are 45,000 of those professionals that are affiliated to the membership bodies that the NHS is permitted to work with. Only 20% of that 45,000 are at a level that the NHS will engage with. So we have taken the smallest proportion of qualified therapeutic professionals and made them available to work with the NHS. And in a year of the pandemic, that bottleneck has been reinforced by the mental health systems.
But why is that the case, Dave? Why is that the case? Is it because that there are certain guidelines or certain, what's the word I'm thinking of? I suppose regulations, standards, if you will, that some of those therapists don't live up to? Or is it just that it's too much work to process too many? Why do you think that's the case?
Well, if I answer this, I'll probably be ranting for about a year. The bottom line is money. The systems have been set up to create a monetary system for organisations out there that actually put mental health behind money. So an accreditation that is based on a monetary system means that it reduces the level, the pool of talent that anyone can be involved in within the NHS, and that automatically impacts the patients involved in the NHS. That automatically impacts on mental health, and the cycle just goes round and round and round and round and round. And ultimately, it's based on money.
Good. Sorry, there's a message here that's come through from Sharon McGovern that
who I know well.
Yeah, who absolutely needs to be read out. And we had a rough idea because she sort of mentioned some things in the past on this program, but she says that didn't realize my mental health was going to be so badly affected, but losing 9 family members in Liverpool and 3 close friends, including my friend of 60 years, I started wondering in my depression, what is the point? I'm lucky I have a good husband to pull me through. The doctors just told me that I'm not alone in what I'm feeling. The only help I got was he could give me antidepressants. Well, hello. It's a suicide pack from doctor. Wow.
I have to say to you, because I happen to know Sharon McGovern, I've met her personally, and in her field, she is I'm not going to do a whole advert here, but in her field, she's regarded as outstanding, and she helped me enormously last year with a situation. I was stunned. It was life-changing, to be honest with you. So to get that from somebody like her is really worrying, because here is someone who people look to for help and for advice and for guidance. You know, this is one of life's big survivors.
Yeah.
And it's a shocker. It's a shocker.
And
it's because the whole system is based on charitable work, and that in itself causes a dynamic. This is why we've done things very, very differently, because the people within the therapy world and the mental health world are fully aware of the systems that are set up. They're set up and designed to increase the monetary systems for the charities. They're not designed to resolve the problem.
Can you explain that a little bit more, Siobhan? Siobhan, explain this thing. You keep mentioning the monetary systems. Can you spell it out for us? What do you mean by it?
Okay, so everybody that does 450-hour course over a 4 to 5 year period is passed, once they pass a diploma, as being completely qualified. They've studied every subject, and I speak about myself here. They've studied every subject of psychodynamics, person-centered, every theoretical approach that you can do. Then what happens is you become a member of a charity, because that replicates the perception that actually you're an ethical and appropriate therapist. That part of it is a very positive way of doing things, because it gives people...
Can I stop you? Can I stop you there? I'm confused. If you've gone through this 5 year course, maybe I'm being thick, but you know, I'm just acting as every man. You've taken a 5 year course, which has probably cost you a lot, and it's a lot of work. You've done 450 hours, you say. Why do you not go into practice? Where does the charity angle suddenly come in? That's what's confusing me.
Because employers are under the illusion that in order to be an ethical practitioner, and this is where Siobhan's right, having an affiliation to a membership body provides an ethical backdrop to your work. Okay.
So give us an example. Give us an example of what that would mean.
So membership bodies, including APA, have ethical guidelines for how our professionals engage with clients.
Okay.
That means that if something goes wrong, the client has a point of reference to go back to and acknowledge that something's gone wrong and get that dealt with. So the membership body provides a huge safety net for ethical practice, and that's phenomenal. Okay. However, they are voluntary organisations. There is no governing body in the UK for any mental health practitioner outside of a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist. So counsellors, psychotherapists, art therapists, drama therapists, there is no regulatory governing body. Okay? So employers use the membership bodies that are established as their point of reference to say this particular individual works ethically and professionally. But over years, that perception has become almost a closed shop recruitment tool. And that's where the bottleneck with the NHS falls into play. because the NHS isn't using the 100,000 plus professionals that are qualified. They are using the 20% of a membership body that is accredited and therefore has paid additionally to that charity for that accreditation.
So putting it really, really simply, people have become qualified, then they've been forced, and this does happen and happens consistently, those students are forced to attach themselves to a charity to even be able to complete that course. Then they have to, once they're qualified, they then have to do approximately another, let's just make it another 450 hours. Off the top of my head, that's not an accurate number. Then they have to do that, and that makes them accredited. So that gives them a piece of paper that says that their standard is above and beyond. Now, the problem with that is that the entire employment system, the NHS, is completely under the belief that that charity is producing really, really well qualified individuals, but it's all based on academia. There isn't a therapist out there that will disagree with me saying that actually a therapist that is self-aware plus their training is what actually makes the best therapist out there. And these charities are beginning to endorse courses that the therapist doesn't even have to go through their own therapy, and those courses will suitably equip them to work with a client. It won't. The best therapist is the therapist that's been through therapy themselves. So the whole system in the last 50 years has been designed to take more and more money off professionals, to give them a piece of paper, to make it appear in a public perception that they're qualified, they're ethical, and they're appropriate. And they're not. Not all of them are by any means. And I speak from personal experience on this.
I mean, A, I'm in shock. B, I've got a few questions. Number one, if you go to a hospital, God forbid you've had let's take an example. I'm picking this at random. Somebody's had a suicide attempt. Mercifully, it's failed, and they realize they need help straight away. And eventually, the local authority will say, right, you can go and see Mrs. Jones or Fred Bloggs in a few weeks' time at XYZ hospital, which is in your local borough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those people surely have been approved by the BMA or somebody. Those people must be that you're going to see. Or again, you're going to say, no, they're part of a charity and then they're not actually qualified. What's the deal?
Okay, so the only people that the NHS will send a client to, a patient to, that are governed, i.e. that they are registered with a governing body, legally governing body, will be if the professional they are seeing is a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist.
Right.
Okay. They will be governed by the British Medical Council if they are a psychiatrist, and the HCPC if they are a clinical psychologist. If they are sending somebody to a counsellor, that counsellor will be affiliated to one of the charities, and they will have gone through additional payments and processes with that charity to be receiving that referral from the NHS. That, when we have the crisis of numbers, to me is abhorrent. When we see comments like Angela's, desperate to get mental health practitioners engaged, when we are only or the NHS is only able to work with a fraction of the number of professionals available, is abhorrent.
The really sad thing for me is it's a false perception. There are so many thousands of incredibly good therapists out there that could be employed by the NHS, and actually APA's changing this, because when we actually contact recruiters that are advertising on behalf of the NHS and we actually educate them and enlighten them to the systems that are out there, and they're looking to employ therapists that are attached to a charity rather than a governing body, They then start to look at their own adverts, reword them, because they recognise there's a closed shop approach. The system has been going on since 1975, or 1976. So it's an embedded system in the whole of the mental health world. And more importantly, when the government created, if you like, they offered the opportunity for CBT therapists to come in and flood the NHS a few years ago. These CBT therapists, no disrespect to them, CBT is a phenomenal tool, and I use it myself. But actually, so many of them had no other psychological training whatsoever. So you could have a cab driver that would go off, do a course on cognitive behavioural therapy, and he would be put in front of somebody that might have had post-traumatic stress disorder, might have gone through serious historical trauma. CBT won't touch that. So most people go to 6 sessions of CBT, come out of that and end up finding that they're left abandoned, not having progressed anywhere. But at least it looks good because the NHS are offering a service.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Phil, could you read Sharon's comment? Because that's absolutely, it couldn't be more opposite.
Well, that is what Sharon actually says. She says that I contacted a few people in the medical and mental health bodies, and although I'm a qualified CBT counsellor, they would not let me help, as I am not, I'm guessing that should be affiliated with anyone, and would not even let me do voluntary work. I've been helping people successfully for 40 years. React to that in just a moment, if you will, but the one thought that goes through my mind is that, does this mean that all of this talk and awareness that people like you guys and other mental health campaigners, and dare I even suggest the work that we do at MRS and WRS, does that mean it's all in vain? Because honestly, this is a very grim picture.
Unfortunately, it is, but you know what? It has changed since 2003. So the recognition of, and I used the time that I entered the profession as my guide for this. Once upon a time, there was a lot less men coming, for example. Now I can honestly say that my private practice is split almost 50-50, sometimes 60-40, with more men coming than women. So it is changing. The fact that the coronavirus has exploded the awareness of mental health. If there is anything that is going to come out of this virus, it is the recognition that we are one being, that our mind affects our body and our body affects our mind. And my personal hope is that the recognition of what APA is trying to achieve within the world of mental health is recognised as completely different to any other system. If we repeat the systems over and over and over and over again when we know they're not working, nothing will change.
Well, that's the definition of madness, isn't it, Siobhan? That's the very definition of madness. Now, could you answer Ed Grossman's point? Ed's saying, I now get it. Now, how would I know if a therapist is suitably qualified and is above board? Surely the NHS should govern this, which is logical, right?
You can know somebody's qualified, and that's by actually asking a therapist what their level of qualification is. Any therapist ought to be able to provide that, and that's a course that they've studied to diploma level of 450 hours in front of a tutor. We've challenged, and it's really important to acknowledge this, we've challenged Woucher recently, because Woucher continually put out adverts for therapeutic courses that don't even remotely equip somebody to be a therapist. It's like £19 for a diploma. And when you're sending that message to the public that you can spend £19 and practice as a therapist, it's incredibly damaging to the world of mental health. But the way to make out that you are sitting in front of an ethical and appropriate therapist is ask for their qualification. Ask them whether or not the course has included 450 hours. Ask them what membership body they're actually attached to. Because most membership bodies, including
Can I jump in? Siobhan, I'm going to jump in with a human perspective on this. When you go to see a therapist, you're not in the best way. Let's put it mildly. You're not operating at 100%, right? It takes big balls to sit down in front of a total stranger and say, before we start, How qualified are you? Theoretically, when we're having this conversation on the radio, it makes sense. When you're sitting in somebody's office and you're kind of in kit form anyway, because that's why you're there, it's a big ask for somebody to be able to have the nerve and confidence to do that.
In which case, I would hope that it would be the therapist. So, for example, when I'm sitting in front of a client for a first time, I will tell them what my qualification is. I will tell them that I have a supervisor. I will tell them where they can go to complain. So I actually take the pressure off of them because I give them the information, because I think giving them that information, as you say, and I totally agree with you, Russ, when people go, they're often very scared of being judged in their mind by what somebody else is going to do in front of them that doesn't know them.
But make no mistake, I'm sure that's very comforting to them, but you don't see doctors having to do that. They don't have to give their qualifications because you sort of trust what the doctor's going to do. Just before we move on much more, I do need to go back a little step when you mentioned about Voucher. What did they say in response to you when you contacted them?
Well, I actually ended up contacting the CEO, and I was responded with that they make a conscious effort for the perception not to be that you can practice with these qualifications. I completely disagreed with that and went back to him and basically stated the seriousness of these qualifications that they were advertising and the dangerous perception that they were created within the public perception. Unfortunately, that's where it got left. He said that he would make every effort to make sure that didn't happen. I don't believe that. I've seen the advert since. And unfortunately, thousands of people buy these courses for £20, £12 sometimes.
Oh my God.
Thinking that diploma will equip them to practice. And unless people know exactly what it takes to qualify, then they might well sit in front of somebody that has sat and done a £12 voucher course, believe that they're qualified as a child therapist. So I'm also putting that out there too. And in essence, the danger of that is astronomical for anyone sitting in front of somebody that has done a voucher.
You see, the thing is, I am shocked rigid.
In the absence of anyone from Voucher, of course, what we should say is that if anyone from Voucher is listening and wishes to respond to that, then they'd be welcome to do so on any future episode here on Men's Radio, just to get that in.
Now, it's really interesting. I'm going to link my question to you with a comment from Ed Grossman again. Russ, so true about qualifications and asking them. He says, I go to see my lawyer. I can see the certificate on the wall. Now, average punter, not in good shape, goes to see a therapist, which they're holding up. It's like a lifeline to them. And they see some piece of paper on a wall in a nice frame you've got from W.H. Smith. They go, qualified.
Yeah.
You know, we're programmed to be impressed by something on a wall with a diploma, a nice red legal seal. You think that must be bona fide.
It's one of the reasons, Russ, why every single professional who comes to APA receives a dedicated starter pack about those interactions and making sure that in that first contact, that reassurance is being given, because it's the first step in empowering somebody to understand that they are in a safe space, but they also have support if they need it from within that space itself. And this is the thing, as you say, most people that take that hugely brave step, and it cannot be underestimated how tough that is.
I agree.
But those that take that step are already in the process of healing by taking that step. For a professional to knock them off course by not having that reassurance in place as standard, that's dangerous. So if a professional isn't laying that information out for somebody at the earliest possible opportunity, then there has to be questions asked. And the majority of self-aware professionals, and APA is the only organisation who in its membership process takes people through a verbal conversation of discovery. We get to speak to absolutely every single professional and put them under pressure in a safe way, so we know that that self-awareness is in place. So the client knows that they are speaking to somebody who has understood how important that first contact is and how to use it to the advantage of the client, because that empowerment at that point is crucial.
I got to be honest with you both. You've really shocked me today. I make no bones about it. You've absolutely shocked me. I can't speak for Phil, but
you can believe me.
You've shocked me. You've shocked me deeply, and in a very bad way. I'm horrified by some of this. Horrified.
Let's give some positives. Okay, so last year, APA produced 2 pieces of guidance around the pandemic. One was about the being in isolation and how to cope with that, and systems and tips and tricks. And one was about grieving from a distance, before we were told that funerals were going to be done differently, etc. Okay.
And it's odd you say that, because this very moment, a very old dear friend of mine is burying his wife and put up all the details on Facebook. What a world we live in. Jeez. Yeah. What a world.
And so we've tried at every turn to put support and advice out freely available, but we also put out a support system that was available to the NHS of how they can access therapeutic professionals to support those that are working on the front line of COVID, and get that post-trauma care in place in a way that is meaningful. Not asking people on the front line of this war to ring a helpline to speak to someone that's done a mental health first aid course. That is not an appropriate response from the mental health system. We need to be activating every single qualified professional that is available and potentially able to work with those that are working with this. We need a mobilization, and what APA has done last year is give a framework to keep those safeguards in place for the NHS, for social care.
Quick 2 comments. Martin Allen says, suffering with CFS for 35 years, and now 2 weeks into COVID, topped off with 1 year into a mental health issue. I'm a very strong-minded person, but lockdown has kicked me down. And Sharon McGovern, I'm going to answer you, Sharon, if I may, guys. These courses make someone like me who spent years training so angry. It makes everything I do seem a waste of time. I get it, but Sharon, please remember the thousands of people that you have helped. Don't shove that away and just throw it away as though it's nothing.
Yeah.
All right.
I totally agree, Phil. Sharon, thank you for everything that you do and for everyone that you work with. What these money-orientated systems that have leached off of mental health have done is eat away at the professionals that do an amazing job. And the mental health system this year has got to come together, has got to take off the bottlenecks, has got to acknowledge that what we were doing before 2020 was not going to work moving forward. We've got to
we don't have the time to even answer a huge question. What happens if you're on benefits? How are you going to do this? And Sharon's saying no help on benefits. You can't cure a lifetime of pain in 10 1-hour sessions, which is all doctors allow. I thought it was six sessions. So 10 seems to be
6 is the minimum, 10 to 12 is the maximum, dependent on the postcode. And this is why we have put the framework together that allows that support system to move.
Guys, thank you so much. I'm so sorry, but we are flat out of time. We really appreciate it. There's only one thing for it. We're just going to have to get you back at another time to come back on and talk more.
We will do. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's sad to paint such a daunting picture, but bear in mind, it is being exposed. You are talking about it. We're doing brilliantly.
Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you very much, Dave Sleet. Thank you very much, both of you. That's really much appreciated. There you go, Siobhan Crosby, Dave Sleet there. Marvellous stuff.
Lucky that Dave Sleet's not in your family, because he'd be Dave.
That's a very strong note to end on. Thanks for that. We'll see you on Friday at 11. Bye, everyone.